Hello everyone and welcome to your free Ornament Girl tutorial. My name is Kennedy and today I'll be showing you how to make this sweet citrus ornament. This is a no-sew quilted ornament pattern that comes together pretty quickly, and you can check out the links below the video for some freebies to help you get started. Let's go over your materials. Below the video you'll find a full printable supply list with all of the measurements for your materials, as well as a printable template to help divide your foam into 12 sections. In order to complete this pattern, you'll need fabric, disc-shaped foam, satin straight pins, 2 pieces of white trim, scissors, a pen for marking your foam, a flexible measuring tape, 1 strip cut out along the dotted lines from your disc marking template. If you'd like a bow to top your ornament, you'll need ribbon and metallic hanger string. If you want a more natural look, you can opt for twine and faux leaves, and you might choose to include some beads in colors that correspond to your fabrics. Let's start by dividing your disc-shaped foam into 12 equal segments. You'll need to cut out a strip along the dotted lines from the disc marking template included below the video. Once you have this strip cut out, lay it along the edge of the disc, along this equator, or this mold line running around the entire edge at the center of your foam. Pin that in place along the edge and wrap the template all the way around, keeping it in line with that equator or that center line as you go. Once you return back to the beginning, just pin it in place. Mine got cut a little short here, but that's okay. Now we're going to go around the foam and mark a dash on each side where each of these little segment lines are here. So I'm starting by just marking one right between where my 2 ends should meet, and then I'm moving to each dash line along that strip and making little marks on my foam. Once all of your marks are made, you can remove the strip from your foam. And now you can see you have 12 equal marks all the way around that foam. Now that we have our 12 equal sections, I'm also going to use my pen to just connect these dashes across the equator line all the way around the foam. This just makes them a little more pronounced and easier to see when we're using them to place our fabric. Now that we've divided it into 12 sections around the edge, we're also going to connect some of these lines to find the center of the faces of our disc. The trick here is that you don't want to use a black pen to find the center. The base layer of our ornament is made with white fabric, and most of the time black ink will show through there. So I'm going to switch over to a pencil. You can also use something like a butter knife to score the lines into the foam, or you can use a very light colored pen. We're going to start by using our flexible measuring tape to connect 2 opposite marks on the foam. So I have one of my dash marks here. I'm laying the edge of my measuring tape just along that dash mark and bringing it straight across my foam to find the opposite dash mark all the way straight across on the other side. Once that is straightened out, hold it in place. You can even pin your measuring tape if it helps. And now I'm just going to draw a line across, again using a pencil so that my marks don't show through under my white fabric. Drawing a line gently, I'm sort of scraping it into the foam here, so I'm really scoring it more than I'm drawing it. But now once those lines are connected, you've divided your foam in half. You can sort of see my line there. Now let's switch to the opposite, the side going across. You can use any marks really. If you wanted to connect all 12 of them, you could. We don't necessarily need to do that for this ornament. We just want to know about where the center is. So again, I've connected my measuring tape with 2 opposite marks, and now I'm drawing or scoring my line all the way across the foam just so that I know where the center is. And 2 lines is plenty to find the center for this ornament. Let's do the same on the other side. And there you go. Now you have the center of your ornament where these lines intersect on both sides of your foam, and you have your 12 segments marked around the edge. Let's add some fabric. Starting with your 4.5-inch square of fabric number 1 in your white, this is the base layer. Hold this square with the pattern side facing away from you and fold it in half and fold it in half again. And now with this piece folded in quarters, really you just need to crease this corner up here to find the center point, unfold, and now with the pattern side facing up toward you, pin down through the pattern side at that very center point of the fabric that we found by folding it twice. Now on one side of your foam, at that center point that we found by connecting our marks across the foam, where those lines intersect, push your pin into the foam at the very center and push it down flat. Now we're going to start pinning this fabric down flat so that it lays against the foam and gives us a base layer to work on top of. The trick is we don't want to place any pins on the other side of the foam. So you're always going to be pinning along this equator line that is running around the foam. So start by just pulling, I like to start with the corners, pulling one of the corners so that your fabric is smoothing out over the front. You don't want to pull it so much that you're pulling your pattern totally out of place, but you just want to make sure it's nice and taut. And now we're going to pin this fabric in place, but we're following this equator line. We're not pinning way up here on the other side of the ornament. We're following this equator line around and just placing a pin right there in the fabric. Let's do that for the other 4 corners. Pulling them tightly and always pinning as close to that equator line as we can get. You can sort of pull your fabric back to check to make sure that you are on the mark there, on that equator line. And now we've pinned down our 4 corners. Let's do the same for the edges, pulling them tightly, the sides of our square, and pinning along the equator line. Now we have our 4 corners and our 4 sides pinned down. I'm going to go around and just add a couple more pins in between each of those. So again, I'm smoothing it out across the front and always keeping along that equator line. I'll just add another 2 or 3 pins, however many are needed to keep it nice and smooth between each of those sets of pins. On this section, I might do 4 extra pins just because it's a little bit bigger. And just continue that all the way around, always keeping your pins along that equator line and smoothing out your fabric the best that you can. Once your fabric is smoothed down and securely pinned all the way around the foam along that equator, you can go ahead and trim off any fabric that's extending past the pins. Make sure you leave that center pin in, and once you've trimmed off all of the edges, you are finished with layer 1. In layer number 2, we'll be adding those citrus slices around the center of your ornament. You'll need your 3x4 inch rectangles of fabric number 2. Mine is a solid fabric, but if yours has a pattern, make sure you hold this rectangle horizontally with the pattern side facing away from you. Fold the top edge down by about 3/4, half an inch to 3/4 of an inch. You don't have to be exact about that. And now fold the piece in half crosswise and crease to find the center point. Unfold and place a pin along this center crease just a hair below that top folded edge. Returning to our ornament, we're going to find the placement for our first citrus slice here. We're going to use one of our segment lines, and again, since you extended it across the equator, you can see it on the other side. We don't need them running all the way across, you just need to be able to see where to line up your measuring tape. So we are starting our measuring tape at that center pin. I like to start at the edge of the pin, and we're making sure that it's aligned straight with one of the segment lines on our foam. And once that is lined up, you will pin your pin at the 1/8 inch mark. So again, you're running straight from the center pin to one of your segment lines, and you're pinning 1/8 of an inch away from that center pin. Go ahead and press that all the way into the foam, and now make sure that the center crease of your fabric is lining up with the segment line that you used to place it. And now we'll do a prism fold. Fold the left half of your fabric down toward the right and the right side of your fabric down toward the left to make a narrow triangle. You don't necessarily want one of your edges to be sticking out underneath here, so you can always unfold and adjust that to make sure it's nice and smooth. And now this is only pinned in one spot, so you can swivel it and pivot it to line it up where you want. We are lining up the center of our triangle with that same segment line that we've been using to place it the entire time. And once that is centered, you're centering it on a segment line and between two segment lines right outside of it. Smooth down the center and pin it right there in the middle. And of course, keep your pin along that same equator line. Now for our left edge, we want to just make sure that our left edge is falling just inside our segment line. So if it's extending over your segment line at all, you want to sort of squeeze it in so that it's falling just inside. This will help us make sure our triangles are spaced out enough to show a little sliver of white in between each of them. Once that left edge is sitting just inside one of those segment lines, pin along the left edge along the equator. Smooth out the right, again keeping it just inside a segment line, and pin along the right side. Now you've added your first slice. Let's prep another piece. Hold your rectangle with the pattern side facing away from you. Fold the top edge over by about 1/2 inch. Fold it in half and crease to find the center. Unfold and place a pin along that center crease just a hair below the top folded edge. Returning to our ornament, in order to give us some symmetry and sort of orient ourselves, we're going to move directly across from the triangle that we just placed. Directly straight across from this triangle, I land on this segment line here. I didn't draw it very long, but you can sort of see it under my fabric. So again, I'm measuring from the edge of the center pin, and I'm making sure that my measuring tape is aligned with the segment line on the foam. And I'm pinning right at that 1/8 inch mark. So my pin is 1/8 of an inch from the center pin. I'm lining up the center of my rectangle with that same segment line on the foam. Fold the left side down toward the right and the right side down toward the left, making sure your edges are smooth and lined up. And now we are again going to center our triangle with that same center segment line on the foam that we've been using. Smooth it down and pin at the middle, always pinning along the equator. And now our left side, we want to make sure, of course, it is sitting just inside the segment line. So you can see here this time when I sort of moved my fabric over, it bubbled up a little here. We can place extra pins to smooth that down. We want to make sure to set the edge of our triangle inside those segment lines to make sure we're getting those little white slivers between each of our slices. Again, on the right side, I'm doing the same thing. I'm moving my edge so that it sits just inside that segment line there. Pin that in place, and now that we have some bubbling, we can just smooth that down and place an extra pin to hold it in place along the equator. Prep another rectangle by holding it with the pattern side facing away from you, folding the top edge over by about 1/2 inch, folding in half to find the center, unfold, and place a pin along the center crease right below the top folded edge. This is how you'll prep all of your pieces for your prism folds. Now we've placed 2 triangles on our citrus ornament. We're going to place 2 more between each of those. So to line up our next one, I'm going to fall between our 2 triangles here. I'm moving directly to this next segment line. So here's the edge of one of my triangles. I'm moving directly to that next segment line, and that's where I'll be lining up my measuring tape. So of course, putting the edge along the edge of my center pin and lining up against that very next segment line next to one of my already placed prism folds, and pinning at the 1/8 inch mark. And now we'll do another prism fold, folding the left side down to the right, folding the right side down to the left, and adjusting to make sure all of our edges are nice and lined up. And of course now, we want to, again, keep these edges within segment lines. Here's the segment line where I lined up my measuring tape. That's where the center of my prism fold falls. So I'll smooth down and pin at the center along the equator. And now I am keeping my left edge just inside that segment line, and my right edge just inside that segment line. And now you can see how shifting these within the segments gives us this nice strip of white in between each triangle. And for extra bubbling, you can smooth it down and just place another extra pin there. Always pinning along that equator. Now you can see on this side where your last triangle falls, centered between those 2 segment lines, and of course you'll do the same directly across on the other half. Repeat this exact same process to finish filling out your citrus slice. Once you have all 6 of your triangles placed, you can go around the edge of the foam, trimming off any excess fabric that's extending beyond your pins. You can remove the center pin. If it left a hole in your fabric, you can use the tip of the pin to sort of scooch those fabric fibers back into place. If that doesn't help, you can always add a bead or sequin at the center of your ornament when we're finished as well. And once those edges are trimmed off and all 6 of your triangles are secure, side 1 is finished. To cover the base of side number 2, we are going to use the exact same steps as side 1, Holding our square of fabric number 1 with the pattern side facing away from you, fold in half twice and crease at that center point to find the very middle. Unfold and place a pin through the pattern side at that very center point. Find the center point on your ornament where all of the lines converge and pin your fabric into place at that center point. Now smooth these corners out. I'm tugging at the corners of my fabric and pinning, always keeping my pins along that same equator and fabric line around the edge of my ornament. Continue pinning all the way around the foam until your base square is nice and smooth. Once your base square is pinned down all the way around the foam, you can trim off any extra that is extending past your pins. When you are trimming on side 2, always be very careful. Make sure you know where the tip of your scissors are. You don't want to put the tip underneath one of the prism folds from the other side and accidentally cut it. And layer 1 is finished. We will complete layer 2 the exact same way as we did on the first side with one of your rectangles of fabric number 2 with the pattern side facing away from you. Fold the top edge over by about 1/2 inch, fold in half to find the center, unfold, and place a pin along the center crease a hair below the top folded edge. Now to figure out where we want to place our triangles, we are going to use the triangles from the first side so that we have symmetry. So here is one of my triangles from the first side, and here is underneath there the segment line it's centered on. If you can't see your segment line, you can also use the center of your triangle from the first side to line up your measuring tape. So I'm starting at my pin here, putting my measuring tape along the edge of my pin, and I'm pulling my measuring tape all the way across to the point of one of my triangles on the previous side to make sure that it's all lined up. And pin at the 1/8 inch mark. And complete your prism folds the exact same way, folding the left side down to the right and the right side down to the left. And this time you can now use the edges of your previous triangles to line up the edges of your side 2. So I have the edge of my triangle here. I'm finding where I left the edge on the other side, lining that up and pinning along the equator. Same for the right edge. I'm going to use my previous triangle here to line it up to make sure I get those white slivers in between and pinning along the equator. Now I'm going to smooth down the middle and place a few more pins just to hold those ripples in place. Complete these same steps all the way around on side 2, always using the triangles from side 1 to make sure they're falling in the same placement. Once all 6 of your triangles are in place, you can go around the edge and trim off the excess. Of course, being careful to not accidentally get the tips of your scissors underneath one of the prism folds from the first side. You don't want to accidentally cut those off. Once that is trimmed off all the way around, you can remove that center pin and try to scratch out that hole, or of course you can always add an embellishment there when you're finished to cover the hole. And now we're going to add some trim to add a white rind around those center triangles. This is going to go a little differently depending on the type of trim you're using. I'll show you some examples here. So this lemon ornament here, I'm using the same trim that I'm going to be using in this video. This is about 1/4 of an inch, 3/8 of an inch wide, and I'm going to be moving it down from the edge to make sure enough of it is showing. On this orange ornament, I used a much thicker trim. It was probably about 1 inch thick, so I actually lined the edge of the trim up with that equator. So you can sort of play around with it and see how much of the white you want showing. The trick is going to be to make sure your pins can be covered by the band that makes the peel around the ornament. So with my trim that is about 3/8 to 1/2 of an inch wide, I'm going to just look at one side of my ornament here and decide where I want the top to be. The top is where we're going to start and stop our trim, because when we're finished, we can cover it up with either our leaves or our bows. I'm just going to make this here the top of my ornament. So I'm laying my trim beginning the edge in this white sliver that's going to be the top center of my ornament. And I'm keeping the top edge of my trim about 1/4 of an inch away from the equator. And again, this is because I have a little bit thinner trim, so I want to make sure that it's going to show all the way around. Place a pin at that top corner of your trim. Make sure you place your pin as high up on that trim as it'll go to make sure we can cover it with our band. Now wrapping it around your ornament, I'm wrapping to the right here. I'm trying to keep it that same 1/4 of an inch away from the edge all the way across my triangle. And I'm placing my next pin here in this next white sliver as high up on that trim as I can go to make sure I can hide my pin. And I'm just going to continue this all the way around until I return to the beginning. And now I've returned to the beginning of my trim. I'm just going to overlap it just a bit, pin my new piece in that same white sliver, and you can trim off any extra. Now flip your ornament over and repeat those exact same steps on this side of the ornament, but the trick is to make sure you're starting and stopping your trim in the same segment. You want the top to be the same on both sides. So here's the top of my ornament. I'm just flipping it over, and with my second piece of trim, I'm starting in that exact same segment, still moving about 1/4 of an inch away from the equator, and repeating those same steps all the way around. Once that trim is added to both sides, we can now start our band to cover all these raw edges and pins. With your long strip of fabric number 3, hold it with the pattern side facing away from you, and we're going to fold this in thirds. You won't be able to fold the entire piece at one time and keep it folded, so just work with the first couple of inches here, folding one edge in about 1/3 of the way, and then the top edge down so that you have your band folded in thirds. And again, you're only really going to be able to do this with a couple of inches at a time. So I'm just worrying about these first few inches, and I'll get to the rest later. The trick here is to make sure that your band is wide enough to cover all of your pins and the very edge of your trim. So mine is a little skinny here because of how far out I put my trim. So I'm going to actually unfold it and make it a little bit bigger just by folding in less of my fabric. And always lay it at that top spot. So now when I lay it across, you can see it's wide enough to reach across the edge of my ornament and cover my pins on both sides. So here I'm going to place 2 pins to hold the band down at the top of the ornament. That top is where you stopped and started your trim. And keeping it folded, so I like to flip it over here and just fold a little bit at a time. Keeping it folded, I am wrapping it all the way around my ornament. So you can see that that instantly just makes it look so much more beautiful because you're covering up all those fabric edges, the pins, and the top of your trim to make it look like all one piece across there. So just take your time, continuing to fold a few inches at a time and wrapping it around your ornament. You want to pull pretty tight, but you don't want to pull so tight that you're distorting the pattern that is featured on your outside. You could be using a solid for this too. Either way is fine. So I'm just going to keep working on this all the way around. The band can be one of the trickier parts of an ornament, but it is definitely one of the finishing touches that really makes it stand out and look beautiful. So we want to make sure we're taking our time. I'm sort of pushing my trim back up toward the center there. If you need to, even pin the trim at the sections in the triangles, you could pin along the top there too. So I have wrapped all the way around. Returning to the top of my band here and placing 2 more pins to hold it in place. If you have any extra fabric, you can trim it off. And I'm also just going to go around and make sure my trim edges are hidden under my band. And now you have an adorable lemon or grapefruit, lime, orange, whatever colors you used to make your citrus slice. If any of your pins are showing through on your trim, on this particular ornament, I had a hard time covering all of my pins. You can use beads or sequins around the peel of your slice to go ahead and cover up those sections. Same with that center dot. If you couldn't hide that hole, you can cover it with any kind of embellishment pinned into the center as well. Now let's go over how to top off your ornament. If you are going with the leaves and twine, I'll show you how to do that now. If you want a bow topper, stay tuned. I'll go through those steps in just a moment. So starting with my 4 faux leaves here, I just plucked these off of a little wreath or some fake flowers. You can buy them or just pluck them off something that you have sitting around. I'm holding 2 leaves together here and pinning through them toward that top edge. And now at the top center of my ornament, I'm pinning those in place near where that band is pinned. We want to eventually cover these up with our leaves and bows. So you could do as many leaves as you want. You could do 4 on the front, 4 on the back. However you want to do it, you can really play with it. I'm going to do 2 more here, pinned along the other edge and pinning right there toward the middle again. Spread my leaves out a little. Adorable. Now with a long piece of twine, put the ends together to fold it in half. Find the center and about 4 inches down from the center there, you want to just tie a knot. So I'm just wrapping both strands around my finger here and tying a knot. Once you have that knot made, you can now make a cute little bow on top of that knot. Just tying a simple bow here. And now you have a little twine hanger. Gives you sort of that natural touch to add with your leaves. If you want to get a little decorative, you can thread your pin with a bead that corresponds to your ornament. I'm just using a white pearl bead here. And now I am pinning directly through that knot, down through the knot I tied in the twine. And returning to my ornament, I'm just going to pin this right in between all of my leaves there. And now my ornament is finished. If you want to add a bow topper, I'll show you how to do that now. With your longest piece of ribbon, put the ends together and fold in half to find that center point. Cut your ribbon at the center, so now you have 2 equal strips of ribbon. Holding them together, fold in half to find the middle again, and cut so that you have 4 equal strips of ribbon. Now one more time, holding these all 4 together, fold in half. This time do not cut them, just crease that center point and place a pin through all 4 strips of ribbon along the center. Now flip your pin over and spread these strips out on the pin, and one by one fold these ends back onto the pin until you have 8 equal loops all the way around to make a cute little bow. Once you've folded all 8 loops back onto the pin, flip it over, and now you can see the cute bow that you made. Pin this into the top center of your band to cover those raw edges. Follow those exact same steps with 2 more strips of ribbon to make 2 more bows. I've used a slightly shorter piece of ribbon in yellow to make another bow. I'm going to just layer this right on top, pinning right down into that previous bow. And with an even shorter piece of white ribbon, I have done the same. By using gradually decreasing lengths of ribbon, your loops get a little bit smaller so that you can make a tiered bow. I'm pinning this right on top like I did previously, and now I have a cute layered bow on top of my lemon slice. To add your hanger, use a 10-inch piece of thin ribbon or metallic hanger string. Put the ends together and tie a knot. And using a pin with a bead or a sequin, pin directly through that knot and pin this into the top of your bows, hiding that pin underneath with your bead and having a way to hang your ornament. Once you have added your hanger with your ribbon bows or your leaves and twine, your ornament can be finished. If you want to continue adding some beads to your ornament in corresponding colors to give it a little more decoration, you can go ahead and do that. I hope you guys had a wonderful time making this ornament. It's a great way to add some color and spring and summer fun to your crafting. We can't wait to see your finished ornaments, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching!